These days, the internet feels like it's been around forever, like it's old hat. And despite it being relatively accessible for 25 plus years, today's internet still has its share of annoying trends and fads, from people sharing the same GIFs, the same memes, and a whole slew of annoying social media challenges. I'm sure if you pause this podcast and think for a minute, you can think of several things that are around the internet today that just make you want to take your computer and smash it. But don't do that. In general, the internet's great. But way back in its infancy, in the 1990s, the internet had a whole different collection of annoying fads and trends. And we're going to go over a lot of them here today as we go way, way back in the day, as we look at some of the weird and annoying internet fads and trends of the 1990s. In full transparency, my first access to the internet came in late 1995, early 1996. And boy, it was so different than what's out there today. Just the speed of being able to get on the internet was so different. Although dial-up internet where you had to use an actual phone line, that wasn't really an internet fad or trend, but it sure as hell was annoying. When I was kind of putting together a list for this segment, there were two things that immediately popped into my mind as far as what I remember about mid-90s internet fads. And that was literally the idea that the internet itself was a passing fad. Anything that's that new and popular, that fast, that's kind of an unknown, scares a lot of the older generation that are set in their ways. So the internet itself was seen as a passing fad to people of my parents' generation, while television was likely seen as a passing fad to my grandparents' generation, and the automobile was seen as a passing fad to my great-grandparents' generation. And you just go back further and further. The funny part is, those older generation that said the internet was a passing fad are now ones that have Facebook pages. Hell, before he passed away, my grandpa had a Facebook page for years. I used to love chatting with him on there. The other thing I immediately thought of when thinking of 90s internet fads and trends was the fact that people thought there was a finite size to the internet, like you might reach the end of it at some point. And I suppose in the early to mid-90s, there was a limited number of websites you could go to. So if you had access to a computer and a lot of time on your hands, I'm sure you could probably visit a great number of the websites that were out there, although I doubt you could ever visit all of them with new ones springing up every day. As far as 2023 goes, we know there's basically no end to the internet. You could scroll and search for months and never come close. According to a Forbes.com article from February of this year, there are in total about 1.13 billion websites on the internet. But also, according to the article, about 82% of those are inactive, meaning it's closer to 200 million websites that are out there that are actively updated and visited. But still, that's a lot of sites to try to visit. Way back when I first got on the internet, I set up my AOL mail name for America Online. There were other emails. The other one that was really popular back then was Hotmail. It was a free email site compared to ones you had to sign up for with a paid account. A man named Sabir Bhatia founded it in 1996. Hotmail stuck around for a while. It wasn't until 2013 that it was totally phased out. It basically was absorbed into Outlook through Microsoft. I had a Hotmail account, and the funny thing is now I wish I could go into that account and check my emails from 20 years ago. Another thing that was really interesting during those early days of the internet was the fact that in traditional print magazines, there would be articles and lists in them featuring websites that you should go visit. It's an interesting kind of cross-branding of, I guess, kind of a dying medium now, the print magazine, with the new and up-and-coming thing with the internet kind of crossing paths. Did any of you out there who were on the internet in the mid to late 90s ever get ideas for websites to visit from traditional print magazines? That seems like something that would be in the teen magazine section. I could be wrong. I don't think I remember Time Magazine or Life or Newsweek having articles about internet sites to go visit. Do you remember when, if you were going to a website, some of them you had to accept Adobe Flash to let you into the site? Like if you didn't allow Adobe Flash and you went to the site, it just didn't work. I think that was a trend that stuck around into the 2000s. I seem to remember Adobe Flash being kind of the bane of my existence for many years. But then you click Adobe Flash and you go into these sites, and there were a lot of things that were unique to websites in the late 90s that aren't really around anymore. Some sites would have music that would start playing as soon as you went into the site. I remember my MySpace page did that. I don't know how many people got annoyed with that. I'd pick my song I liked, and that would be the ambiance of my profile page. But that's more mid-2000s. Two things I remember about visiting websites in the mid to late 90s that I don't really see anymore. One of them is the visitor/hit count on the website. A way to humble brag about how many people have come to your page, or if the number was really low, be sad and ashamed. That was one of those first instances of the being obsessed with likes and comments on social media, begging people to like and subscribe. You know, I do the same stuff. But back then it was, please come to my site so my hit count will go up. And the other thing was Guestbooks. Do you remember websites with Guestbooks where they'd have a link to it at the top of the homepage? Please sign our Guestbook, like it was a motel or something. And you could go into the Guestbook and see people who had left messages. Of course, you could do just like on YouTube with comments, delete ones that you don't think are appropriate. So if you went to leave a message in the Guestbook that said your website sucks, you could go and delete it so people don't see that and then drive down your hit count. Another really annoying trend or fad of the late 90s internet was scrolling text. Instead of it just being words on a screen, it was words that would move, slide across the screen, slide down, rotate. Words that would rotate like 3D, like that was the biggest thing ever. Sometimes it would be like a news ticker that would be on the bottom of the cable news channels. It would be like that, so you'd have to sit and wait for it to come back around if you really cared what they had to say. I feel like the scrolling text on people's old websites was kind of like the laser background in 1980s school photos. At the time, you think it's so cool, and you look back now like, really? I thought that was good. I try not to be too hard on people that were building their own websites in the mid to late 90s, because it had to be difficult trying to make something that was engaging to people when you don't know what's popular. Now, if you were going to build a website, you could go to a bunch of other websites and look up articles about what makes a good website. Talk about being meta. But back then, you had to just guess or go to sites with a really high hit count and full guest book and see what they did. You'd find some of these really simple 4th grade level websites with glowing, glittery text, a bunch of different weird, I guess they'd be considered GIFs now, but moving images, lips, or butterflies or something like that. But you couldn't be cool unless you had the dancing baby GIF. Oh my God. That was one of the first internet fads that I just couldn't believe that this was what was considered cool. And I was only in my early 20s then. Or that stupid hamster with the stupid hamster song. Sorry, I had to play you a clip of it, so now it's stuck in your head. You can go to archive.org, and there's the Wayback Machine at the top where you can search for old websites, and they have timestamp screenshots of websites from way back, so you can kind of see what they looked like. It's a fun way to waste time. But I remember an episode of The Simpsons from 2000, so it was season 12, and Homer creates his own website where he's Mr. X, and he spreads gossip about people all around the town, trying to get his hit count up. But before that, his first website was all these random things. The dancing baby, flying toasters, lips just yelling. It's so funny, but it's also so true that there were a lot of websites like that. But those were some of the 90s internet fads and trends that I remembered. Are there any I missed? I'm sure there are. I may end up doing a part 2 to this, because to some, 90s internet is now ancient history. I mean, it is. It's 25 years ago. And surprise, surprise, the internet was not a passing fad. It is definitely here to stay.